Hi there, welcome to another edition of the Monadnock Showdown. I'm here with Parker Springfield.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
and you
you're
are
first.
Judy
I am
Fine.
Judy Fine. How you doing, Parker?
I am good. How are you?
I am wonderful.
We had a lot of comments on the last show, and so that was on the pipeline.
Yes.
You had a couple of things you wanted to share about that, I guess. Did you get a lot of feedback? 'Cause
I got some feedback. It's definitely a topic a lot of people have an opinion about. Did you get feedback?
I did. You know, congratulations to Sarah Launder. Apparently she won some sort of award for part of the show, so congratulations to her. I don't have the details of what that award is.
I do not know what you're talking about. Are you bestowing this award?
No. No, she was awarded from the United Anti-Frackers Association this giant trophy.
No way.
Yeah, so congratulations to Sarah for that.
Well, she did an awesome job. She did a better job than we did.
Yeah, it was a big fracking award, is what it was.
I got it. So what I did want to say, what I think you were referring to a second ago, is that we were talking about how it would be great to put that same kind of time and energy and those resources into fuel sources that could take us into the future, instead of this, what might be becoming an antiquated fuel source. And I read an article this week that I thought was interesting that sort of pertained to that kind of, the first, I don't know if it's the first airplane, but there's a solar-powered airplane that took off from Abu Dhabi today or yesterday. Okay. And it's solar-powered, and it's set out to circumnavigate the globe entirely with this, it's going to be stopping a lot. In 5 months or so, circumnavigate the globe solely on solar power. So I thought that was really cool.
And how long again?
5 months or so. It depends on weather and things like that. It's a small plane, only one pilot, so they're actually tag teaming the flying. But that's the kind of stuff that I would like to see us putting effort into, and not ripping up, instead of ripping up lands and putting more pipes out that we already have and that sort of thing. And
I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I do want to kind of bring up a point where we did get some comments on the show, and one of the comments from I had it right here a second ago. Let me just find it, because my phone.
He's just
I'm
posting
looking
on
directly
Facebook.
right
Don't
on
listen to him.
on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And one of the comments I wanted to share about the show was. I should have wrote it down. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you should have.
This just got posted not too long ago from Jim Giddings. And he says the place that they referred to in the show is Prickly Park.
Prickly?
That's kind of
what we called it.
Calling
yeah.
Right? It's actually Pickety Place in Mason, New Hampshire. And kind of interesting, the house was the model for Grandma's house in the Little Golden Book of Little Red Riding Hood. So, New Hampshire is full of all kinds of interesting little nooks and crannies like that.
Yes, Little Red Riding Hood's house.
Little Red Riding Hood on Golden Pond, that sort of stuff. Today's episode, though, and we haven't made this a big secret or anything like that, but we tape the shows on Monday evenings, and they actually air on Thursday nights. So this is a Monday evening, and we're doing a show on Pumpkinfest because it's been, obviously the past year, because of the riots and everything else, it's been kind of a controversial topic for multiple reasons.
Yeah, even before that.
And even before that, but especially after the riots. So what's kind of interesting about taping on a Monday is, I believe, Wednesday, it goes to committee. So you're actually going to watch this on Thursday, and by that point, it's already been voted on whether or not there's going to be a 2015 Pumpkin Festival. I will tell you right now.
Yeah, we're starting a pool.
I am going to assume, because I'm pretty sure, and I can't tell you how. Sure.
Insider information.
I'm pretty sure that we're not going to see a 2015 Pumpkin Fest. I'm about 90% sure it's not going to pass committee.
Should we have some kind of bet?
Well,
if you're wrong, what are you going to do?
Tell, but yeah. Well, why don't you bet me? Go ahead. You bet me. You and I will place a bet. You bet me something, and we'll do it on the next show. If there's a Pumpkin Fest, I'm 90% sure there will not be one. So we're going to tape the show assuming there isn't going to be one. But if there is...
So yesterday in the committee meeting,
right,
they shut it down.
Right.
That's what he's saying.
That's what we're going to assume. But if I'm wrong, what...
We're going to come up with some remote. I'm going to make you do something.
I'll
have a camera,
like
something in town. I'm not sure what it is yet.
Don't make me eat anything or anything.
No.
Like that.
No, this isn't Jackass. No.
Well, it all depends on who you ask.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not asking those people. Yeah, I'm gonna have you do something.
I'll do it. I will do it.
In town.
I'm that
on
confident.
camera. Okay.
I'm that confident.
You heard it here.
One of the people last year that I think did a fantastic job reporting on Pumpkinfest and had a great show here on Cheshire TV was Jared Goodell. Jared's our guest today, and we'll be coming right back after this, and we'll talk to Jared in a second as I
stretch it out. Stretch. You got to warn.
I did. Thank you. I like live television. Anyway, Jared put on a show last year that was a fantastic show, and I think because of some of the controversial things that happened towards the end of the show, the actual show itself is a little marred in that kind of controversy. So I want to get his opinion on Pumpkinfest, and I want to get his opinion on whether or not they should have voted to have the 2015 Pumpkinfest, because I'm telling you right now, last night they voted no, I'm assuming. So we'll come to, are we ready? Can we go to commercial? We'll come to Jared right after this on Cheshire TV Channel 8.
Wake the sun, tell him that I've begun to dream of things to come. Tell the trees not to look for me. I'm going to find some peace of mind. Wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun.
But it would be safe to keep your distance until there's no secret that laughter makes you smile. Reliable sources say that chicken soup has found their way out of this year's dangerous, but they are returned.
Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. Go to discovertheforest.org.
Thanks, and we're back here on the Monadnock Showdown. I'm Parker Springfield, and Judy Fine is to my right, and to my left is our guest for today. It's Jared Goodell. Hi, Jared. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the show. I know that you're a busy guy. You're doing the right now. You're doing a radio show in Manchester, right?
That's right. Up in Manchester, 94.1 up there.
94.1. You're doing your program director there. It's like a hot AC kind of format.
Yeah, more a CHR.
CHR.
Top 40 music.
Excellent. Good stuff. Perfect stuff for you. A perfect format for you. Now, I want to get to the controversy because you had a part of Pumpkinfest go extremely viral. And we definitely want to talk about that. But I also, before we get to that, I want to talk to you about your opinions on Pumpkinfest as itself. Because I think, as I said before the break, I think part of what you did last year has been overshadowed by the controversy. Because you put on a hell of a show. I mean, you really did. Can you tell us how that show came together? Because basically you put on a fantastic, marathon, if you will.
Yeah, look, first let me say that, Pumpkinfest is something I grew up with. I mean, this year would be the 25th Pumpkinfest. I'm 23 years old. Pumpkinfest started the same year that I was born. So Pumpkinfest has always been something that I've looked forward to every year of my life, something that I've gone to. And I'm also interested in media. So I saw an opportunity to bring, something near and dear to my heart, the Pumpkin Festival, something that I grew up with, to viewers at home who had become removed from the Pumpkin Fest because of past years' controversies and the rapid growth of Pumpkin Fest. I felt that a lot of people, locals, were staying at home
Yes.
and avoiding the Pumpkin Fest, and I wanted to bring it to their living room because I thought that there was some magic to Pumpkin Fest, and I wanted to bring it to them.
And so one of the first things I want to address, and we've tried to have Ruth Sterling on the show, and to her credit, she didn't say she wasn't going to be on the show. She
couldn't.
She couldn't for this show. In prior times we've asked her, there's always been something coming up. And again, this is being taped on Monday. It went to committee last night, so I'm sure that, like I said, I'm pretty confident we won't have a 2015. If we do, great. I hope Ruth comes on. But if it's been shot down, she's not going to have any interest in coming on, I would imagine.
Do you agree with him, Jared? Do you think it's going to be shut down? I mean, was shut down?
Look, I think it's it's a 50-50 bet. That's how I look at it. Pumpkin Fest, as I mentioned, is really near and dear to a lot of people's hearts in Keene. But there's also a lot of bad. And I think that, personally, I think that whatever was voted on last night, I think it was too soon. I don't think that there has really been enough public discussion on Pumpkin Fest yet. I think that, I know that there was a public discussion about a month and a half after Pumpkin Fest happened. But, I think emotions were still running high. I think a lot of facts had not been made public yet. And in the past 5 months, a lot more has come out. We know a lot more now. The community really has had a nonstop discussion about Pumpkin Fest. And I think that those things really need to be discussed at City Council's level. And so I think that if a decision was made last night, personally, that it's premature. I'm not willing to say, that it went either way. I'm not sure.
And I'm not gunning for it to go either way. I mean, quite frankly, I'm not. I just have some information that I think, based on the councilors on the board, I just have a feeling I know how it's going to be voted. I could be 100% wrong, and I hope I am, because I know there's a lot of nonprofits that really rely on Pumpkin Fest. So I kind of hope I am wrong. I'm not gunning for it.
Well, can we talk about that? Because who benefits? It's talked about as if downtown businesses, just life is great every Pumpkin Fest. And do you think that's really true?
I mean, look, I've had conversations with quite a few downtown business owners who tell me that Pumpkin Fest, can be a great thing, but it can also be a real nightmare. A former business owner in Keene, told me stories of, before Pumpkin Fest got to the size that it has been in the past few years, of when he just shut his store down in the middle of the day because it was tourists coming in not to buy his products, but instead to use his bathrooms. He had a lot of theft that day. He had a lot of, broken merchandise that day. So I think for some people it is a successful day for some business owners, but for others it's a real nightmare, and it's hard to gauge whether or not it is a pro.
Right.
I agree with what you said on that, because I think it depends on the kind of business that's in downtown.
Food.
Well, yeah, food business. I mean, if you're somebody like, let's say, Ingenuity Country Store is a great example. Look at the amount of merchandise that can be stolen in that store.
Right.
So it's very easy when you are overpowered by the crowd. You've got that many people coming into the store. It's quite easy for somebody to grab a stuffed animal or whatever it may be that they're selling there and take off with it. And is it a benefit or not? Yeah, on the counter of that, I'm sure there's plenty of legit purchases too. But I think maybe Life is Sweet is making a killing.
Right.
Life is Sweet is making a killing. Lucas is making a killing. Ted's, I would imagine he's making a killing, but I would imagine Ted's has the same kind of problem where, are you really going to go there and buy athletic apparel and shoes during Pumpkin Fest and lug your Nikes around all day? When that could just be you could spend 80, 90, 100, and whatever it is on those Nikes and walk around Pumpkin Fest and easily have them stolen. So I think there are some businesses that do benefit, but I don't agree with the idea that the whole city benefits. I mean,
maybe the nonprofits with kiosks benefit the most.
And that's really
is that a reason to keep doing it?
And I think that I want to make a clarifying statement about that. There is no actual requirement that anybody selling goods on Pumpkin Fest be a nonprofit. What do you define as a nonprofit? For me, that is what the IRS defines as a nonprofit. There are several organizations who sell goods, whether it be food or crafts at Pumpkin Fest. that are, either for-profit business or a hobby business, or or who are not a nonprofit. So I think when people say that a lot of nonprofits will be hurt in this, I think there are a few, yes. But I'll point out that just days after Pumpkinfest last year, when this very argument was being had publicly about the loss that local nonprofits would feel if Pumpkinfest went away, the Beth Truman, who's a big person locally when it comes to nonprofits, she helps fundraise a lot. She was instrumental with Keene Ice. She said, look, we do make a few $1,000s that day. I'm involved with a few nonprofits that do make a few $1,000s that day, but Pumpkinfest won't be the end to our organization. It's not making us, it's not going to break us if we don't have it either. So, several nonprofits have said that in past years they actually lost money. It cost them several $100s. I don't know the exact figure, but I want to say around $500 just to have a booth that day. If it rains, they're out that money and they're out all the product that they bought to sell that day.
Yeah, in years past when I worked at K-Rock, we would put on a music festival, and we ran into the same problem. If it rained, we were screwed. I mean, we were absolutely screwed, and that's that happens.
So the argument isn't really about who profits necessarily. It's a labor of love, and do we want to do it?
Well,
that's the
to that end, it's a labor of love for who, and who really wants to, who really benefits the most out of it. Period. Is it the children? Is it the grandmothers and the fathers and things like that?
Why are you pointing to me?
Because you're a grandma, right?
No one's supposed to know that.
Then she's not.
Okay.
But she just
It's all
just
good.
pretends to be. Let's say you were.
Let's say you have four
Let's say you have four grandchildren, or whatever, or three, or whatever you want to pretend you have for the day. Is this a fit? You don't go.
I don't go. I have brought nieces.
You're the
there.
demographic.
I'm the demographic.
Yes, you are. I would
sorry.
imagine. You are.
Sorry,
but
I
you
didn't
are. But,
support.
but why though? Why?
Because it feels too hectic and crazy and parking and crowds. And I brought my nieces a few years ago, and they did the parade, and the parade was just this line of kids in costumes forging through the crowd, and one of my nieces looked like she was going to cry the whole time because she was terrified because there was just huge people surrounding her. So it wasn't what I was expecting to, the experience I was expecting to give her. So yeah, you add that with all the parking and the whatever, and it's sort of.
Is it because it became too big?
I hate to say that. I feel guilty.
Is it because it became too big?
Maybe.
I mean, if it was a smaller thing, my son's 6, and I'll tell you, my son went. We went together. He enjoyed getting his cotton candy and those kind of things. I don't even know if he would remember he went to Pumpkinfest because it was just, crowds, and he saw a lot of people's behinds. Because just no, but it was that's all he got to see because he's he's a short guy and he's walking.
Parker
and
was jealous.
And there's crowds. No, I looked at plenty. Don't worry. There's it was just nothing. It was hard for him to be able to enjoy part of it. And I'm not knocking it. I think I really am not.
Cool.
I think it's just become too big. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. Look, when Nancy Sporborg, came up with this idea back in 1991, people told her that she was crazy, and and then she did this, and there were 600 pumpkins, and it was a great community event. And over the years, it really has been a great community event. And I think that is the number one argument that a lot of people are making about Pumpkinfest is we can't let this community event die. But my argument to that would be that a community event is really supposed to bring a community together. And at least for the past few years, Pumpkinfest has really divided this community more than it has brought it together.
Interesting.
And I think that if Ruth Sterling, I think what Ruth has done is great. She took this over. She puts, this is really a labor of love for her. She puts her entire year into this. She has to fundraise. She's put personal funds into this. But I think that if she really is dedicated to having a community event in Keene, I think it's time to hang up the hat on Pumpkinfest and to come up with a new idea, something that will really bring the community together, like Pumpkinfest did, 23 years ago. I just don't think that Pumpkinfest can do that anymore. A lot of people have said, make it smaller. I don't think that Pumpkinfest is something that is advertised right now.
I don't think it's something you can make smaller.
No.
You can't take something huge and then make it small again. But I think what you could do, and maybe this is something I don't understand, why the need to have it in downtown. Why does it have to be on Main Street? Why can't we move it to, say, Cheshire Fairgrounds? And don't give me the argument that Cheshire Fairgrounds is technically Swansea. I get it. All right, it is.
I wasn't going to,
No,
but
I've
okay.
heard, but that's an argument. No, I've heard that argument. That
So it's
you
like a
can't have it.
Keene-
Well, it's a Keene festival, and you can't have it in Swansea. I mean, look, it's more. The fairgrounds are built for this sort of
Yeah,
thing, and that's why we
exactly.
have it. Well, wouldn't that make more sense?
I would agree. I think that if the Pumpkin Fest were to continue, a bigger venue would be appropriate. But I think that what this community really wants is something that brings it together. Look, every town in America, any town, has its Old Home Day celebrations. Keene has its Pumpkin Festival, and I think the people really want something to be in their downtown. They want to be able to go enjoy their downtown. It's the highlight of the city, and right now they don't have that. The Pumpkin Fest is not that thing. And again, I would challenge Let It Shine. I would challenge Ruth Sterling to come up with a new idea and put their resources towards that, so that we can really bring this community together instead of dividing it like Pumpkin Fest has done.
That sounds like a great idea to me.
Just moving it. I mean, that makes some sense, because it's going to be impossible to shrink the size of this. And I think there's a lot in this community that people who are pro Pumpkin Fest. I think there's this let's band together and show them that we're not going to let it die, and we're going to prove
Well, it's
them
hard for people to
wrong.
let go of something
That's
been around for so long.
And the argument is that, and I've heard this too, that, and I disagree with this to a huge degree, that it had nothing to do with, the riots had nothing to do with Pumpkin Fest. The riots were the college kids, and Pumpkin Fest shouldn't be to blame. Well, here's the reality of it, right? There would be no mass parties. There would be no heavy drinking. There wouldn't be any of the rioting.
Pumpkin Fest is a party weekend, for sure.
It's a catalyst. Whatever you
Sure.
want, it is the reason for people to come here. College kids, adults were partying too. I mean, there's adults that will party, not as much as we used to when we were kids, maybe, but it happens. And it happens. So, early on when the riots hit, that was the big argument was, this is not a Pumpkin Fest problem, it's a Keene State problem. How would you?
Look, I agree with you. I mean, this really is a Pumpkin Fest problem. If Pumpkin Fest wasn't happening, the riots would not be happening that day. If Pumpkin Fest happened a week later, the riots would have happened a week later. Pumpkin Fest is the reason for the riots. Look, I think Steve Gilbert put it best in an article, I think it was a week ago. He said that a few years ago, everybody was talking about how do we fix the problem of college kids smashing pumpkins downtown after the festival. We fixed that problem. But when we did that, we really alienated the college. We said, in a way, we don't want you here because you're troublemakers. So the college, I think the students said, fine, we'll hang out over here in our territory and we'll have fun over here. And that is exactly what happened. I mean, these riots are about 3 years old now, 3 or 4 years old. And it really coincides with the time where we said, we don't want kids smashing pumpkins in the street anymore.
How did we stop them from smashing pumpkins?
I think Ruth came up with a great idea.
Explosives inside the pumpkins?
No,
It's a great idea.
Dog poo?
Controlled
Dog
explosion.
poo. You lit it on fire. And, okay, go ahead.
She called it. Yeah. Okay.
She put the large dumpsters, in the footprint, and then she asked the college kids to come out after and compete for a grand prize, and who can clear their section the fastest of pumpkins. And great idea. I think it fixed the problem, but it caused another one.
That worked.
A problem that I don't think can be fixed at this point.
Well, and that's just it. But so I think whatever the vote ended up being last night, we know the opinion of this journalist. But I think whatever the vote was based on whether or not you can have a Pumpkin Fest safely at this point, because you're going to have people now that are going to. It's just human nature. Don't tell me I can't party. Watch, I'm going to show you. That's going to happen.
But if there weren't
That's gonna
riots, would we still be having this conversation?
I think to some degree there's always, maybe not to the extent of what happened last year, but I think I'm getting from you too that this was a festering thing that was going to happen eventually. It was going to blow.
Look, I mean, beyond, to go to your point, would this discussion be happening? I think the responsible thing that the city council should do is to have this discussion regardless of whether or not there were riots. Let It Shine now, the organization that puts on Pumpkin Fest, has a history now of running in the red when it comes to Pumpkin Fest. And that's a serious concern for the city. For the past 2 years, I think last year Let It Shine ran $16,000 over budget. They didn't come up with that money. They still haven't come up with that money. This year they're in the red again. If Keene State College didn't pony up the $33,000 that they did, Let It Shine would be on the hook for that amount of money. And that's a concern that I think the City Council should take up, because the city is really fronting these services, police, fire,
Right.
safety, medical, and a slew of other services, public works services. They're fronting those services, and the taxpayers pay the bill initially until Let It Shine pays that bill. A few years ago, we saw Center Stage put on an event that cost more than they could afford. So they were unable to pay for the street fair a few years ago, and taxpayers had to help defray that bill to the tune of, I believe it was around $30,000. And that's a concern that I think that the City Council should be weighing in addition to the riots this year, because Let It Shine has not been able to run a solvent organization. They are in the red again for the second straight year, and if another Pumpkin Fest happens, we can only assume that the expenses will increase. And there is really no indication that their revenues, sponsorships, are increasing as well. So what happens if there's a big debt next year? Do the taxpayers have to foot that bill? What if the college doesn't decide to pay a portion of the security bill? Who's going to pay that bill? It's going to be left on the bill of the taxpayers. And in a city where the tax rate is already too high, and where we have people who are trying to figure out how they're going to pay their tax bills so they can stay in the home that they lived in all their life, we can't be subsidizing these sort of events.
Right.
Right, and safety aside, that's a great point, because
Yeah, well, that's important.
a taxpayer, again, as you stated earlier, I mean, I think people from the area, the townies, if you will, I think that a lot of them try to avoid Pumpkin Fest. I think a lot do.
Yeah.
I think it's just, you don't go downtown. The people that do, are people that have young kids that want to start that magical tradition that you talked about when we first went on the air. But is it lost now? And back to Steve Gilbert's article, that is exactly his point, is the magic of it gone? And now with this big black eye, how do we fix that?
Now, I've only been in this area for a decade or so. I take it you guys have both been here. I don't know how long you've been here.
No, I've been here about that too.
So I've heard I've heard stories about all kinds of street events happening in downtown Keene in the past that have sort of gradually died off.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Christmas tree lighting has been around since I can remember. I remember going to that every year. Luckily, that's still around.
See, I didn't even know that.
There was a street
Right
fair.
around Christmas time.
It's a half Jewish thing, maybe.
Oh,
okay.
that's right.
I only half knew. Go ahead.
Center Stage put on a street fair annually. That was real big. That's when there really was a fair downtown. But like with anything, costs increase,
Right.
and if business owners aren't able to contribute to make these events possible, they don't happen, and that's what has occurred.
I will say, is from a cost standpoint, I was very surprised when the security bill initially all fell on Let It Shine, because I have a little bit of experience with footprints during the Pumpkin Fest way back before Let It Shine took over, when it was the other group,
Center Stage.
When Center Stage did it. When K-Rock first went on the air, we wanted to be part of Pumpkin Fest. We were told we couldn't. There was another station that was exclusive to the market and all that. So we came up with the idea of putting on Pumpkin Palooza. That's how Pumpkin Palooza was born. The reason we were able to put on a rock show during Pumpkin Fest was because we were outside of the footprint, this magical line, this footprint. And so we had our own footprint for our little festival. And it just so happened to fall on the same day as Pumpkin Festival, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right? Well, so my argument, when I heard that they were responsible for everything, didn't make any sense, because legally, there's a footprint. And whatever happens within that footprint is their responsibility. Outside of that footprint, I can't understand how they, Let It Shine, was responsible for anything outside the footprint. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, let me explain it to the best way that I understand, and that is that Let It Shine was required by the city to hire a number of officers to be determined by the chief of police in Keene. And I believe that
And
number...
we did too for Pumpkin Palooza, so it's all very familiar because it's part of how the licensing goes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I believe that number was somewhere between 36 and 40 officers on at any given time. Obviously, the number of officers that participated that day was much higher as shifts happened. So, those officers were in the downtown area, protecting Pumpkinfest as they were hired to do. But then they had a new role to bring on, and that was to protect Pumpkinfest. So the officers that were inside the footprint had to step on the perimeter to protect, Pumpkinfest, to protect the perimeter from being, broken into by the rioters. So, those officers, while they weren't on the footprint, they were protecting the footprint. They were protecting the festival goers from coming onto the footprint, and God knows what would have occurred if that had happened. Even if we put the logic aside and say, well, she still shouldn't have been responsible, or Let It Shine still shouldn't have been responsible. You're responsible for what you take responsibility for. And as a part of the license, Let It Shine took responsibility for all security overtime costs that occur on the day of Pumpkin Festival. I think we all know, we've already decided earlier on in the conversation that these riots would not have occurred had Pumpkin Festival not have been on that day. Therefore, the officers being used to combat those riots, that's related to the Pumpkin Festival.
That's a good argument.
And Ruth and Let It Shine took responsibility for all costs associated with security that day. It's a document, it was signed, there was full understanding. Look, they paid what they could pay, showing that they, acknowledged their responsibility, but they didn't have enough money to pay their balance off.
So now Keene State is paying, was it $34,000 or something?
Yeah, $33,000 and change, right?
So are they taking responsibility for, or are they?
Exactly, that's a great point, because I think legally now they're basically have said, hey, we're owning up to up to what had happened for their portion of it, which in itself is it's very sticky, because how can you really blame the college for kids that may or may not have gone to the school? Because the sheer volume of people partying, it wasn't all Keene State kids, and that's the other argument. So it gets really, really difficult.
Look, as a part of the broadcast on Pumpkinfest, we went into the areas where these riots were occurring, at about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and we were able to talk to people who told us that they didn't go to Keene, that they were from Connecticut, that they were from other areas, and so I think that everybody that I talked to, in fact, was, not a Keene State College student. So I agree with you that to place blame on Keene State College is unfair. And, I think legally, as you mentioned, are they legally taking responsibility? I think on its face, it appears that Keene State College is paying the security overtime bill, when in fact what they're really doing is making a donation to Let It Shine, so that Let It Shine can pay the bill. And President Huot has said publicly that this is not a precedent. I wonder if college students who were living in off-campus housing were to start a fire in an off-campus house, is the college responsible for rebuilding that house because a college student lived there and because a college student started that fire?
It can get really silly. If you,
I think legally there's some big questions there. So, I don't agree with the fact that the college paid the balance of the bill, or that they made a donation to Let It Shine so that the balance could be paid, because as an educational institution, you want to teach, and you probably want to teach responsibility. And in this case, Let It Shine was not held responsible for the agreement that they originally made. Look, I understand that what occurred was outside of their control, but they knew that riots were going to occur. And that they knew that historically that they had gotten worse and worse over the past few years. So one would assume that they would be worse in 2014, and that they should financially prepare for that. But they didn't do that.
And the fact that that bill is being paid, I hope it won't give them a false sense of managing their books. Like if they're still in the red after the event, just because this has been paid off.
That's a good point.
It's bad business to consider
they're still
that.
in the red. They're still in the red to other folks.
Oh, they are.
So yeah, I mean, you've got all of these like negative points to having Pumpkinfest, and you have to wonder when you're sitting here and you're looking at you're balancing out the pros and cons of actually having this festival. It doesn't take a whole lot of logic to ask yourself, why are we pushing? Why are so many people pushing?
Because they don't want to let go of it.
They don't want to let go of it.
Something they've come to for years.
But at the same time, is sometimes when something has died, you gotta let it go.
Yeah, it starts to smell after a while.
Right, yeah. And I think to Jared's point earlier, and to what I'm hearing a lot of, is like, why can't we just take a break? Chill out, take a break, rethink things, and come back with a stronger one in 2 or 3 years and have a comeback kind of thing. Like, look, even Elvis came back. You know, the big comeback special, right? I mean, he took a couple of years off there, had a couple of nanner sandwiches and went crazy, and then, you know, came back with the comeback special. Probably
he hasn't even left.
Well,
he's still coming back all the time.
Yeah,
People see him everywhere.
You're right. He's at the, you know, he's at the, yeah. He's wherever he is, but I'm telling you, sometimes you can come back stronger.
I would love to see a really good downtown event that, like I've been, and I'm going to get some emails now, but I've been, it's been a couple of years since I've been to is it the Snow and Ice Festival? Is that what it's called? All right, so I don't know what went on the last couple of years, but I found out about the Snow and Ice Festival by accident one year because I was driving down Main Street and there was some dude chipping away at ice in a parking space. Like, you didn't even know an event was going on. I wish we could have a really great, you should do it. You should do it, Jared. Come up with a really great event.
Right,
all right, you could do it in the spring. It's okay.
I'd like to be able to take a break real quick if we can, Rick. We'll come back because the next part of this, and I want to discuss the controversy between Jared and Ruth, because I think there needs to be, I don't know, I know that you've, soon after the event, I know that it went viral and you had a lot of people interviewing you and talking to you. Was there ever, like, both sides of the story? Did Ruth ever talk to you, or did the two of you ever, like, discuss it?
You know, we never saw each other, to be quite honest, or spoke to each other, whether in person or in writing, since Pumpkinfest.
Okay. We're going to get back to that because I want.
This will be interesting.
This is going to be fun. We'll be right back on Monadnock Showdown right after this.
There's a lot of talk out on the street about his mother, his mother, your mother, their mother. But in the end, is anyone really even thinking about them?
Hey Luda, got a sec?
Yeah, what's up?
I'm really worried. One of my friends is living on the street. She's all alone. She doesn't know what to do. I can't even imagine what she's going through. I really want to help her. What can I do?
I know someone who can help.
Really? Who?
Call 1-800-RUNAWAY. They help kids having a rough time at home, in school, or on the street.
How else can you get in touch?
1-800-RUNAWAY.org. You can do a live chat on their site. They will help get her to safety.
Thanks, Ludacris.
Trust the National Runaway Switchboard. If you're having a hard time, get online or call to chat now.
All right, we're back on Monadnock Showdown here on Cheshire TV Channel 8 on this Thursday evening first show after the vote, right? We're for Pumpkinfest, which, like I explained when we started the show, we're taping this on a Monday. I'm assuming that that Pumpkinfest 2015 did not get voted by the council. That's what I'm assuming. I could be wrong, but we don't know. Why not? Let's just give it a shot and see what happens. Judy has kind of didn't you make some sort of bet with me?
Yes.
And we haven't come to the terms
Well,
with
because
this.
if it's not, I don't know what it is yet. I have to think of something good.
Before that, you've got not 20 minutes, less than 20 minutes. You
Okay,
got to
I'll
come
see what I
up with
come up
something
with.
because I have to do it on the air. I have to
Okay.
admit to it and agree on the air. Our guest today, Jared Goodell, who was who put on what did you call the show that you put on? It was very well done. By the way.
Well, I think we called it Pumpkinfest Live. If I
That's a
remember.
great idea. Pumpkinfest Live. How original.
Did you
Okay.
tell people that you were a reporter from Channel 8 TV?
Look, I think Parker mentioned, I don't know how many interviews I did that week following Pumpkin Festival, but there was people didn't really understand a public access TV station.
Right. I mean, the journalists from Cheshire
Yeah.
TV, Channel 8, I mean, okay, anybody can put on a show here,
Yeah.
even people without talent or with talent or whatever you want to do, anybody
Which
can
ones
come
are
on the
we?
show. That's to be decided by the viewers, right? So anybody can put on a show. You can even just get in your car and drive around if you want to. There's people
but
that do that
that's-
on this
that's
channel.
been
It's-
done.
That's what public access is about.
What was cool about your sort of tour of the news stations was that you were, well, it was talked about on Fox, you were on CNN. It was like you brought all the fighting stations. It was on the Young Turks. It was all, like the liberals, the
liberal and the conservative
conservatives,
media,
yeah.
Well, during the controversial clip, and I don't know, maybe I don't know if we can edit that in. It'd be nice to, but maybe
Yeah,
we
no.
can't. I just thought of it, so maybe you can Google it.
We can add
Google
a thought
it.
bubble to our
Google it,
video.
and you'll find what we're talking about now. Basically, what happened is during a live show, you started reporting on the riots that were happening, which, being in broadcasting for as long as I had, that's exactly what you should have done. Whether it's a Pumpkinfest event or it's your show or that person's show, when you're live like that, it's like saying, the guy who was covering a dog show, if the Hindenburg disaster happened in front of him, he wasn't supposed to say anything because he was covering it. So it's ridiculous to say that you shouldn't have covered it. You were doing your job. What happened?
Look, we had been reporting throughout the day on Pumpkinfest and really all about the good stuff that was going on. We were talking to kids, we were talking to families from other states. And, like I mentioned earlier, I had personally gone into the trouble areas earlier in the afternoon to just get an eyewitness look at what was happening. We rolled some tape down there. And then shortly after 7 o'clock is when, the sun went down and things really started to heat up, around the riot areas. And I got an alert on my cell phone while we were live on the air on Cheshire TV from Pumpkinfest that the state police had been called in to help assist the Keene police with riots that were occurring. And there was also a statement that was released from President Hewitt at Keene State College acknowledging that there was an incident and that the college was working with local authorities and the city to manage that incident. So I thought that at that point it was a good thing to deliver that message to viewers at home. And let me make perfectly clear that this was not a stage show at Pumpkin Festival that we were doing. This was a TV show. For people that were walking by, they couldn't really hear us. We weren't facing them. We weren't speaking to the people at the Pumpkin Festival. We were speaking to people at home watching the coverage. And potentially people at home could have been in the areas that were impacted by the riots. And when there is chaos going on outside your window, you turn to media. You turn to local media to find out what is going on. And we, that day, were the local media. There was no other outlets that were broadcasting at that time. So I think it was our duty to report what we knew and what was going on. And I did just that. And while I was partway through reading the statement from President Hewitt at the Keene State College, Ruth Sterling came up next to the camera that I was talking to, and she gave me the cutthroat signal. Now, this is public access TV. Right. There's not really a whole lot you can throw to.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
So I really threw to nothing. I said, we'll be back after this, and then I left it in the hands of the director to figure out what's next. Now, he cut to the opening package of the show, which was about 60 seconds long, and that played, and that gave me time to speak with Ruth to find out why she was giving me the cutthroat and what message she was trying to deliver to me. And in that off-camera conversation, she told me to stop talking about what's going on. She told me that I was inciting a riot. She told me that she was going to pull the plug on our broadcast.
And just to be clear, did she put any money into the show?
No, and this was, again, independently done. We contacted her and said, we'd like to do this. Can you give us a spot? And she gave us a spot. And that's the extent of our relationship.
In-kind donation to the spot. So she had that kind of control of the spot. That's one thing she could say to you is, hey, I donated this, so I have control to some degree.
I mean, look, this was Main Street in Keene. We went through the proper channels to get that spot, but I don't think that Ruth has the power to say, or any organization has the power to say, you can't be here. We're a media organization.
Or I'm going to
it's
censor what you talk about.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, that part can get a little hairy when it's in her footprint, under her control. So I think that from her perspective, maybe that's where she was coming from, saying, I gave you this spot, so I'm going to cut you off. Still, it's like saying that, going to a radio station saying, I don't like what you're saying, so you can't go on the air. That doesn't make any sense. So continue. I just wanted to make that clear that she did donate.
I mean, you're right.
Her defense.
She allowed us to have the space.
Right.
I mean, I guess you could say that. If she hadn't, I probably would have, gone to the city and said, "What's going on?"
Or you could have paid for it.
Right.
You could have,
certainly,
certainly could pay for it.
Certainly. So. At that point, the producer was in my ear telling me that we had 60 seconds before we were going back on, and I told Ruth, we're going back on. Please don't make a fool of yourself on TV. And those are my last words to Ruth off camera. Because, off camera, there was a scene. I mean, her and I were shouting at each other. There was a very emotional moment, a lot of stress for both of us at that moment.
What do you mean by emotional moment?
Look, I mean, I think for Ruth, and I can't speak for her, but I think for her, she was hearing of what was occurring right outside Pumpkin Festival, and that was probably scary for her. She's put a lot of work into Pumpkin Fest. She put a lot of work into trying to make sure that those riots did not occur, and so I think for her that was an emotional moment. For me, I have been putting months into preparing this broadcast and to make it as professional as possible, and now this has just occurred, and this is unprofessional. So I think that's where the emotions were. So the cameras came back up and live, and we were live, and Ruth got right in front of me. She stood right in front of me, and you can see that in the clip. As you mentioned, you can just YouTube Pumpkinfest, and it'll come up. And so I proceeded to say that the producer of the festival is trying to stop me from telling you, the viewer, what is going on in right outside the Pumpkin Festival. And she tried to grab my microphone. She wanted to say that the Pumpkin Fest is safe, that the footprint of the festival is safe, and then she went away.
So regardless of if the footprint was safe or not, I mean, you still had every right, in my opinion, to report what was happening within the town. Because let's face it, it was within the town, and it's a big deal. I mean, Keene is not. We're not Boston, we're not LA, we're not used to having riots. Let's hope we're not used to having riots, right? So it was kind of a big deal. There have been so much speculation out there, and so much, hey, this was wrong, and this was wrong, and this wasn't handled correctly. Grabbing your microphone, she physically grabbed you.
Correct.
So if you wanted to push it, you could have gone after her in a legal way. Yes.
Look, I mean, I it's well documented. Several attorneys reached out to me from across the country in the days after the video went viral.
Because that was simple assault, is what it was.
Yes, I mean there are several things. There was some interest from the Keene Police Department on what occurred that day. I did speak with a detective there about what had happened. They asked for a copy of the unedited video. I provided them with that. Ultimately, it's really the states and the Keene Police prosecutors' decision on whether they want to move forward with charges. I let them know that I did not want to move forward with charges. Again, that was an emotional moment, and to the best of my knowledge, the Keene Police Department and the prosecutor at the Keene Police Department decided not to move forward with charges. But there certainly was. Everybody agrees that there certainly was a level of assault there, where she touched me and it was unprivileged. But look, again, it was an emotional moment. That doesn't mean that I am okay with what she did, but I'm not gonna go after her for that.
The things that she said into the microphone when she was facing the camera, it was good. If she had just said, "I'd like to talk to your audience, could I do that?" and said that, I think it would have been fine. It was late. It was telling you she's going to shut you down and trying to take the mic out of your hands.
Well, you know, to her defense, to some point, you know, when you, just like he was spending months preparing his show, she was spending the entire year preparing Pumpkinfest. And when your baby, something that you are so invested in, is falling apart, and she had no idea what was going to happen to those riots. Were they going to spill into the footprint?
Right. Well, that's what he was saying. It was an emotional moment.
It was an emotional thing. However, you know, maybe not on camera wasn't the best PR move.
There was this weird, I'm going to say this, there was this weird sort of dichotomy where when she was facing you, it was like, I'm going to shut you down. And then when she faced the audience, she was like, hi, everybody, everything's okay.
Yeah, I think
it was this
goes
weird
back
sort
to the
of
emotional thing.
Yeah.
Right?
You could see both sides of her.
I'm not a psychologist, but I would imagine half of her was like,
I am.
Are you? Half of her was like, you know, I've got to save face.
Yeah, it was the two sides of her.
It was a two-sided thing.
Yeah.
I'm pissed at you, so I'm going to be pissed at you. But yet, hi.
Yeah, no, everything's
Everything's
okay.
great. Everything is wonderful.
I'm in my safe place.
Look,
I'm in my safe place.
You know what I mean? And that's how it came off. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just being honest.
No,
that's how it came off.
Yeah.
You know?
And I understand that, and you know, look, I put a lot of time into that broadcast as well. Not nearly as much time as Ruth put into Pumpkinfest, but you know, when there's a safety concern, you have to throw your ego aside. This was a safety issue. Again, we were not talking to the people at Pumpkinfest. We weren't saying, run for your lives, there's a riot, a bunch of drunk college kids. We were talking to the viewers at home, telling them this is what we know, and this is what is occurring, and the authorities are working to make it go away.
And don't drive through this part of town if you're coming down.
And that's another point that I want to bring up real quick, is that there's been a lot of talk about the festival footprint. And Ruth said, you know, in that video and subsequently in interviews, she has said that the footprint of the festival was safe. And I think that the core footprint of the festival, I think she's correct, was safe. But to get to the Pumpkin Festival, there are several satellite parking areas. The Keene Police Department is one of them. Peerless Insurance is one of them. Some of those people that park at those locations walk to Keene, or they're bused to Keene. So look, several people from across New England reached out to me in the days after Pumpkinfest and said, I wish we had known where the riots were occurring, because I had to walk my family through those bad areas to get to my car, to get to our car so that we could leave. So, you know, while the festival footprint is downtown, the footprint is really greater than that, because people don't park downtown. They have to get there, and they have to walk through some of these problem areas.
And that's a good point. I mean, Pumpkinfest is, you know, like I said, the footprint's downtown, but you know what? It encompasses the entire city.
It's like there's a glass dome over you because you're in the footprint.
You know, who knows what was going through Ruth's head at that moment? It had to have been highly charged, highly emotional. You know, there had to have been a concern then, hey, what if the riot did spill over into the footprint? And that's a very, very achievable thing at that moment, because, you know, I looked at some of the video. There were a lot more rioters than there were police.
Absolutely.
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, I remember at midnight, after we had picked up from the broadcast, we were grabbing dinner, and we saw lines of state troopers coming in on Route 9 and Route 12. We saw them, you know, just trooper after trooper after trooper. We all saw and heard the helicopter hovering above Keene for hours that night. And you know, it was brought up recently by Chief Mayola that there's always a way to put together a plan to protect Pumpkinfest, but that his department learned last year that they need a whole lot more officers than they thought they needed.
Right.
Those officers that they had to bring in last year when they couldn't handle the situation. So officers from as far away as Nashua were coming to Keene. That's a pretty long commute. They had to come here, you know, in an emergency situation. They were called in by the governor. And while Chief Mayola said that we can plan for that because we know what we need, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can staff it. You know, there's only so many Keene police officers. When you need 100 police officers, you have to reach out to other communities and to other, you know, off-duty officers. Now, we all know these days with the police that no officer wants to be put in a riot situation because sometimes they have to do things that they don't want to do, and that can be seen for the police, that can be seen as a very bad thing. And so I don't think any officer really wants to work Pumpkinfest at this point,
Right.
because they don't want to put themselves in that situation and put their butt on the line.
I wouldn't want to.
In that situation. So while Chief Mayola said that they can put a plan together, it doesn't mean that they can staff it. Furthermore, it doesn't mean that these other officers that we're pulling from smaller towns have the training to assist in these situations, or that they have the equipment to assist in these situations.
I've heard so many people say, you know, it's only going to take one mistake, one life, one, you know, luckily I don't remember hearing of any real major injuries that happened. I know there were there were a lot of scrapes and, you know, bumps on the head.
Concussions from bottles.
And things like that. You know, nobody died. They easily could have.
Absolutely.
Jerry Goodell, thank you for being on the show. We got to wrap. You
Yeah,
have a
no, I just
question?
want to sum it up with a final vote from
Yeah.
this panel. Yay or nay on a 2015 Pumpkinfest?
I'm going to say nay.
I'm not bringing my son anywhere near it until I can be assured that it's going to be safe.
Is that
So
a
no,
yay
that's
or
a nay.
nay?
That's a nay. That's a nay. That's a
Nay for me
And-
too. All right, it's official.
That isn't to say. Let me
Our
preface
panel's
this.
official.
That isn't to say that I think it's a bad thing. I think it just needs to be
Ah,
readdressed.
pick a side.
I think no. I think it needs
Everybody
to be readdressed.
wins.
And I don't want it
Parker.
downtown. I don't want it downtown. I want it
Okay,
safe.
so you would say yay if it were at the fairgrounds.
Yeah, I'd go with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely would.
All right,
Definitely.
way to cover
Thanks
yourself.
again, Jared Goodell, for being
Thank
on
you.
the show with us.
Thank you.
And one real quick question: Has Ruth ever said anything to you? Has any of you or her, anybody, attempted to bury the hatchet here and just said, "Look, it was an emotional moment. We both made mistakes."
You know,
and-
I attempted to reach out to Ruth, and I, via her daughter, who reached out to me, and I responded, attempted to reach out to Ruth, you know, so that we could reconcile and put this to bed. I have not heard a word from Ruth.
All right.
Ruth, you should come on the show and hug Jared.
We tried. But after the vote, who knows? Thanks for being on. Thanks for watching Monadnock Showdown, and go on to our Facebook. It's facebook.com.
We always want to know what you think.
Monadnock Showdown. Thanks for
Thank
being on the
you.
show. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Jared.